Thank you, everyone. Let's continue the program, and it's an unusual part of the program, and it's with sorrow and mourning, but also a celebration. We want to acknowledge the passing of Kenney, a cherished colleague, mentor, friend. I want to acknowledge many of the people here that are dear to her. Many of us, of course, consider ourselves great friends and colleagues, but there's some family members here, and of course, her husband, Tony Nesburn, who's on our faculty and was the vice chair of research for 20 years here, as well as Jack Scholerman, the chair of the Discovery Eye Foundation. That is, Tony and Chris and Jack were the founders of this meeting some 10 years ago. The initial idea came from Jack Scholerman of the Discovery Eye Foundation, and glad to have you here, Jack, as well. So on December 21st, 2023, the vision research community lost Kenney, MD, PhD, a world-renowned scientist and clinician, and one of the key faculty members of the Gavin Herbert Eye Institute and an active member of the Center for Translational Vision Research. Chris is from New Mexico, proudly so, the land of enchantment, Santa Fe, New Mexico. There's her family home, her elementary school. Her junior high school didn't make it. It's got repurposed to another school, so it's not photographed here as things happen. But there's her high school, where she was an outstanding student there, of course. She was a competitive swimmer, straight-A student, class president, and honor society president. She began her higher education at the University of New Mexico, and somewhat bizarrely, I didn't think it happened in the 70s. I thought that's more of an older vestige. She wanted to be a pre-med student, but she was initially denied because she was a woman. But she persevered and did get her degree in biology and chemistry, then went on to earn a PhD in anatomy and biochemistry at Arizona State University in Tucson, and then moved to the University of Southern California, where she was a postdoctoral fellow in collagen and biochemistry. And then she went on to UCLA in med school. They didn't seem to have a problem admitting women. And again, strange, you would have thought this was a prior era. Still don't know what to make about New Mexico then. But again, after graduating from getting her MD at UCLA, she went on to residency at White Memorial, which is a Loma Linda affiliated hospital in LA. She was very dedicated to that work. She served as an outstanding ophthalmologist and researcher for a 35-year career, and she very much loved her work. She began her practice at Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles and stayed there for 15 years. In 2002, the Gavin Herbert Eye Institute, at that time, Peter McDonald was chair. He then left to become the chair at Wilmer Eye Institute, where he still reigns, and he recruited Tony and Chris and their many of their group to come join us in 2002. And again, we had the good fortune and good sense, Peter did, to recruit her to UC Irvine to lead the Mitochondrial Research Laboratory. I want to acknowledge that for all those years, I attached myself to that lab, and that became was a happy collaborator with her, and we shared that lab. I brought in the fellows, most of them international fellows, to work with her. We shared ideas, and she was my closest colleague and collaborator from a research standpoint. And in fact, as I've shared with Tony, the reason I stayed here, I was at one point thinking of leaving. David Boyer was busy trying to recruit me to go to LA, and Chris arrived, and I fell in love with the research that we could do together, and I've happily stayed ever since. So in many ways, I owe my career here at UCI to Chris, so I always think of her and miss her so much. She had great research interests. The Mitochondrial Research Lab focuses on the effects of drugs on mitochondrial genetics of patients with retinal diseases, such as AMD and diabetic macular edema. We recruited Chris to support her research interests to delve deeply into identifying the molecular and genetics changes in mitochondria associated with human disease, including AMD, diabetes, lupus, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and various cancers. Her work explored which drugs might target and protect the damaged mitochondria so that cellular homeostasis and longevity could be prolonged. Most recently, Chris and her lab group performed morphological, biochemical, molecular, and genetic studies demonstrating that mitochondria from patients with age-related macular degeneration are damaged and dysfunctional. Using the transmitochondrial AMD hybrids, as they're called, these cytoplasmic hybrid cells with identical nuclei from an immortalized cell line, but mitochondria removed from patients with different AMD phenotypes. She showed that were developed by Chris and her group, show that cells possessing mitochondria from patients with AMD have a significant loss of viability, impaired mitochondrial functions, upregulation of pro-apoptotic genes, and enhanced vulnerability to oxidative stress. But that treatment with humanin G, something that she's been working on, and I'll get to that in a moment, and small humanin-like peptides protect and rescues the cells. So again, Chris took a unique approach to her work using these hybrids that have revolutionized the field of mitochondrial research, showing that mitochondria have wide-ranging biological effects never before imagined, and opening up the field of mitochondrial therapy to careful investigation for AMD. Her group, in collaboration with Dr. Howard Federoff, pictured here, who is a former dean of the School of Medicine here at UCI, investigated various drugs and substances that keep the mitochondria healthy and ultimately improve the health of the retinal cells in AMD. In these AMD hybrid cell lines, they show that phytofibrate restores mitochondrial health and increases cell longevity. They identified a novel mechanism of action for phytofibrate that can upregulate PGC1 alpha, the mitochondrial master gene, and significantly improve the molecular and metabolic status of the mitochondria in AMD hybrids. In addition, she and Dr. Federoff discovered that combining phytofibrate with E12, which is known as camphorol, prevents its metabolism in the liver and can increase the amounts available to cross the blood-brain barrier. The discovery could have significant impact on therapeutic potential for AMD, especially as it is an oral medication. And in addition, this same approach to develop mitochondrial targeting drugs could be pursued for therapies to treat other diseases, such as Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and various other significant conditions. Chris was a highly accomplished clinician scientist with an impressive track record of imaginative and pioneering research. She advanced scientific knowledge, as mentioned, of mitochondria tremendously, earning a reputation as one of the world's foremost experts on the subject. She published more than 185 peer-reviewed manuscripts. She was the recipient of numerous research grants and awards from the NIH and private foundations for her work in macular degeneration, keratoconus, and the study of other eye diseases. She was the recipient of the University of Arizona Foundation Award for Meritorious Performance and other awards. As you can see here, she also kindly served in the NIH Visual Science A study section for many years and was its chairperson from 1998 to 2000. Chris accomplished groundbreaking work as a research director of the Discovery Eye Foundation that I alluded to earlier, founded in 1970 by Rhea and Morris Pinus. The Discovery Eye Foundation relocated its labs to Orange County in 2002 with the recruitment of Chris and Tony at that time. And Chris served as the research director and board secretary of the Discovery Eye Foundation. She played a key role in running the research nonprofit, which has contributed, amazingly, again, this is a grateful patient organization that Tony and Chris founded, but they've contributed over $15 million to the Gavin Herbert Eye Institute. I think actually over $16 million at this point. During that time, she advanced scientific knowledge of mitochondria tremendously, earning a reputation of one of the world's foremost experts in the subject. She also discovered entrepreneurship here. The research Chris conducted through Discovery Eye Institute, the Discovery Center for Eye Research, brought out her entrepreneurial streak. She co-founded Almond Therapeutics with the goal of developing mitochondria-targeting drugs for various age-related conditions, including AMD, Parkinson's, and Alzheimer's. In 2015, the Gavin Herbert Eye Institute and the Discovery Eye Foundation, again, as I've acknowledged, Jack Scholerman's effort in this, as well as Tony and Chris together, developed the first Bench to Bedside symposium. Chris took on the role of organizing symposiums, so all the symposiums to date have been organized and led by her. I think, Vladimir, you were involved with last year as well, and now with her sad passing, Vladimir has taken on the mantle, and thank you very much, Vladimir, for your help with this and for all that have done for this. But Chris was the co-founder of this meeting and the director of this meeting for all the years up to now. She was a dedicated mentor, Every student, every resident, every fellow with whom Chris came into contact was amazed by the time and individual attention she gave to them. They described her with words such as kind, warm, engaged, and life-changing. From asking probing questions to uncovering creative ways to ensure they had the resources to conduct their own research, and to mentoring countless proteges in her own lab, Chris always had time to devote to nurturing the next generation of researchers. These are some photos of her and Tony off on their many adventures, which they enjoyed to do. Chris had a fulfilling life with Tony and had adventurous spirit outside of work. Every year, Chris and Tony explored things far and near, and there they are in Africa in the upper left, Antarctica there on top, and of course we all recognize the Taj Mahal, Agra, upper right, and these are Indians, elephants in India, and then an adventure in the Amazon. And more features of Chris. She loved her dogs and her family. This is the Kenney family camping in 2023 in New Mexico. For every year for 50 years, they always camped somewhere in her beloved home state of New Mexico. And then at the bottom, you can see there several times a year she would visit the Kenney Santa Fe homestead. You can see the adobe structure there, near where she was born and grew up. Chris with her Santa Fe family in 2023 there. Again, Chris was always actively engaged in so many things. This is her every year, of course, all of us, the pilgrimage to Arvo in the upper left, and this was celebrating her birthday with Marilyn and Sherry and others from her lab, and there's Tony as well, of course. The tributes to Chris poured in with her passing, many more than we can list here, but Dr. Jameson, who gave a lecture earlier today, in everything she did, Chris Kenney was always dedicated to the well-being of others. I think that's a profound and true statement. I think many of us would put Chris in that category. There's always more than one, but it's always like the nicest person you ever met. There can't be more than one of those, but she was in that group of people that you would say that about. She was an amazing, kind soul. Jing Yang, one of our former faculty and a co-founder of our research program together with her husband, Henry Claassen. Chris was a personal role model for me, my mentor, and dear friend. Our brainstorming sessions were truly inspirational, and no one can replace her. You can see here Henry's comments as well. More tributes come in. Here from Nian Lin, Zha, Winston, Dr. Kenney was a truly selfless person. Her dedication to her work, her colleagues, and her students was nothing short of admirable. Seeing the closed door of her office every day is a sad reminder that she is no longer with us. And again, a comment from Dr. Kefaloff there as well. There's more comments here from Dr. Brown. Chris was unconditionally kind. That's a recurrent theme we see. From Sherry Adelano and Marilyn Chua, who both were the devoted technicians that worked in her lab, and they're here. I saw them earlier. Again, Chris's true legacy lies with the physicians and scientists she mentored and inspired, and how she encouraged us all to be the best version of ourselves. Chris was a remarkable scholar who forged new territory in AMD research to lead toward a potential treatment and took mitochondrial science in daring new directions. Her research integrated experts from disparate fields, including stem cell biology, neurology, and ophthalmology, with the ultimate goal of finding a cure for age-related macular degeneration. We mourn the irreplaceable loss of a cherished friend, an exceptionally collaborative researcher, and a mentor to countless individuals, including the many international research fellows at UCI, several of whom are here today, over the past 20 years that we shared. Chris was beloved by all. She had a warm and engaging personality and was one of the kindest souls we ever knew. We hope to find many ways to honor her in our department for years to come. I'm privileged to call her a friend, a colleague, and an intimate colleague and soulmate in many ways, all the things that we shared. I miss her and mourn her, as we all do. Thank you for all you've done for us, Chris.